anyway, let's see what you have found today on the platter, and let's have some fun. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. If you're on YouTube, you want to press the like button, share, subscribe, click a bell, do all these things that, you know, these people tell you to do. I don't want to push that on you. Just do whatever you want, really. What I'm looking down here is, I haven't seen a ThrillSeeker video in forever. Starlet put this in here. I personally love this dude. He's a trendsetter in the VR world, in the Web3 world, and he's talking about Meta and its insane plan to change VR forever. Now, here's the thing about Meta. They're going to do this. They're making a headset that is cheap. They're going to get adoption, and there's going to be more people plugging in their brains into headsets, man. Like, they have a recipe for success. Zuckerberg has found a way to do this. I'm not a huge Zuckerberg fan, by the way, but what he's doing is he's finding a way to make VR viral. So let's see exactly how they're going to do this. Oh, happy 5 years anniversary to ThrillSeeker as well. That's cool.
Welcome to Tuesday Newsday, your #1 resource for the entire week's worth of VR news. So, it's been a long time, my friends, but I am finally back. And I'll talk about what I've been up to and the future of this entire channel in a bit, but the reason I came back was actually a bit unexpected. Probably the biggest VR news of the entire year, maybe of the past few years, just dropped, and it has a lot of really deep ramifications. Everything Quest and Meta, and honestly, the entirety of the VR market just changed in the past day. And there's a lot of really good stuff, a few legitimate concerns, and some open-ended questions. And I figured this would be the perfect time to try out something that I've wanted to do for a long time. So this Tuesday Newsday, we're talking about one single topic, one really big event. The Quest operating system, the Quest Store, the App Lab, everything that has been a mainstay of the largest virtual reality platform to ever exist is about to.
I disagree with you, Aether, but politely. You know what I mean? Like, so we got a lot of like pushback on VR. I know why. I mean, some people get sick in VR. It's interesting. By the way, welcome to DG360. We just don't, you know, watch this and only like laugh or cry to things. We actually talk about things. Hi. So interestingly enough, let's read some comments here from our live chat. Fathers is saying, VR is not my cup of tea. I've tried to get my body used to being under the hood, but I can't get more than an hour and a half under the hood before I feel sick. There are a lot of people that have motion sickness, and yes, strapping something right next to your eyeballs for hours at a time, probably not the healthiest thing, right? But they are working on different technologies, and we saw many different headsets that are working on this to correct that, to help people with vertigo, to help people. So there are technologies out there. Meta's going to be applying them to most of the newest headsets, and it's really intriguing. So we do have a playlist on DG360 if you're interested in this with AI, VR, Web3. It doesn't get a lot of traffic, but it's a very interesting topic. Also, I do see numbers rising, so I do see adoption going up on them, which is interesting because you can always tell from revenue. You can always see if the adoption uptick is happening, and it is, which is interesting. And then Aether says, I disagree with this quite a bit, DG360. I don't think the majority of people will ever mass adopt a tech that covers the eyes and blocks out the real world. It's too weird for people. And I think that I would just say, like, maybe it could be a generational thing, right? Aether, you and I are a little bit older, right? Like, I can understand your viewpoint in most respects. Like, I kind of agree with you, but like going forward, I would say that as we die off, I think more and more kids are going to just do this, and it'll be a more normal thing. That's just, again, I could be completely wrong. That's just my opinion, Aether. You know what I mean? Drew says, I love VR. I tried a VR boxing game. I was in it. I was in it to win it. I talked about this earlier. Like I tried a VR boxing game on the Quest, and I was like sweating, and I was in it. It was amazing. I had the best time in it. I might put some VR content eventually on the channel. Starlet is very accustomed to VR. She has her own club in virtual, what is it? Virtual VR chat. In VR chat, Starlet has a club there. She says it takes practice in a modern headset. Motion sickness is more of an issue in older headsets. Right, Starlet. So there's a lot of, there's people are voicing out here on VR. I love to see it. Just keep expressing your opinions, whether you like it or you don't. In YouTube, let us know what you do, what you don't. I personally love to hear all different types of opinions. I love differences of opinions.
To be gone. Everything that we know is in a state of change. Maybe for the better, maybe for worse. I guess we'll have to see. But we've got a lot to talk about and a lot to break down. So let's just get right into the news. Just yesterday, Meta dropped a pretty massive announcement that has a lot of different sides to it. And I think it's best to break down each part of it individually and then come to conclusions at the end. And that's because this announcement wasn't just new games or a new headset. It's a complete and total overhaul of how the entire Quest and primary VR ecosystem works at its most basic level. And it also means that the Quest ecosystem doesn't really exist anymore in any recognizable way, with Asus, Lenovo, Xbox, new vendors we haven't seen before all entering the race. So I'll just start with the general theme. The Oculus developer blog titled this move as, quote, a more open ecosystem for developers, end quote. And this is primarily because of an overhaul to probably one of the biggest issues for VR developers and therefore users that the Quest platform has had since its launch 5 years ago. The largest VR app store out there, the Quest Store, is heavily curated to a fault. And because of that, it's always been notoriously difficult for developers to publish their titles to the official Quest Store page. It's in fact been so bad over the years that for a lot of studios, getting their game that they've worked on for say 2 years onto the store is a make or break moment that is never guaranteed. And I've personally watched dozens of studios and games shut down entirely over the time simply because their app was never accepted or it just took too long. Now,
too stringent, too regulated at this point of the game is dumb. So I think Meta's going to flip the script. You need to make sure that it's open enough that you're allowing developers to feel like it's a free space and to create and to profit. Otherwise, you're going to have a dead platform right off from the beginning. The store is important. The adoption, bringing people in, is important. If the developers, the backbone, this is exactly what happened with YouTube and the platform known as YouTube, or what it used to be. Creators came in, they flooded it, right? And more people, as time happened, like they keep regulating the space. They keep regulating it down until like the creators felt like, well, I'm not... I feel like I'm being corporatized, like corpo moves coming in on me. I feel like there's no space to move. So that's what ends up happening with most of these platforms. Usually they're open and free from the beginning. What ThrillSeeker's talking about with Meta is like right off the bat, boom. It's like, boom. It's like a regulated space right off the beginning. So much so that the devs kind of like go, no thanks. So they got to open up the atmosphere a little bit, let the devs come in, let them have the rights to move around, create, and then profit from it, so the algorithm's helping push out product from developers and they can make money from it. Otherwise, why would they use it, right? So interesting. There will be a sea change. They're going to open up a little bit, but not to the point where people are going to end up getting malicious content and software from people that are just trying to schemize you.
Now, that's of course not the story for every studio, but we also mostly only hear and see of the success stories, the ones that made it on the other side. And in case all of this sounds a little crazy or conspiratorial, the most successful VR game of all time to have ever existed to this point, Gorilla Tag, was stuck on App Lab, unavailable on the main store for 13 months. Now, that didn't really hurt Gorilla Tag very much, as they accrued $26 million of revenue during that time, but you have to think about how many VR games were sort of suppressed because the Quest Store has operated this way for so long. And it's because the majority of Quest applications are stuck in what's called App Lab. Most of you know this already, but there's a surprising number of people that have have absolutely no clue what it is, and it's kind of for good reason. The majority of the Quest store is entirely hidden and not shown to anybody. It's just behind an invisible wall. And here is where the first of big changes is coming. Meta announced that they are opening the Quest store, unifying App Lab and the public-facing store into a single app market that will be known as the Meta Horizon store. Now, that name carries quite a bit of weight, but basically, moving forward, new titles will now directly go to the primary store, and thousands of titles will no longer be hidden. And this change will roll out in phases. The first phase, starting pretty immediately, is that App Lab applications will have their own section of the Horizon store, but the goal is to eventually have a system much more similar to, say, a phone's app store. All apps in one place under a unified store with a much looser review period. And this is a good change. I'd honestly say that this is a fantastic change, and it's been a long time coming. And I also know that to people that use VR every day, this isn't anything super massive. SideQuest and App Lab are common terms and tools that a lot of people use, but you also got to realize that the mass majority of VR users are simply not aware that all of these thousands of applications even exist. And it's because they've been quite literally hidden from everybody unless you know what you're looking for. Okay, so that was prong one, a new unified storefront with a new name. It's a huge problem that's solved. And that in itself is already a huge deal. The next part, however, is another big thing because it's a complete change of how the Quest operating system works with itself and with other hardware. So there's been a problem plaguing the...
Okay, great comment, Mad Style. Mad Style says, on other news, the AR/VR Apple Vision Pro sales have dropped sharply. Apple struggles to whip up demand for it. That's because it's a $3,000 headset, right, Mad Style? What is Apple thinking? What is Tim Cook thinking? Apple is dead. Apple has become basically a value stock at this point. They are not growth. They are not innovators. Tim Cook has basically turned it into a bank. It is nothing more than a bank at this point. It's as boring and bland as investing in Coca-Cola or Pepsi. This is exactly what Tim Cook did to Apple. He's killing Apple. He made this headset way too expensive. What is going on over there with Apple? For God's sake, they killed the Apple Car. No more Apple Car. The headset they brought out, you know, $3,000. Who are they? What is their target audience? It's ridiculous what Apple's doing, man. Apple better get their stuff together. They're not even involved with any AI. You got Microsoft involved with AI. You got NVIDIA. You got Tesla. You got all the big names. They've already done it. Google, they're already in it. They're already using it to help them out in every aspect of their business. And Apple is late to the party once again. I think Apple's having like some death throes right now. They better start changing the model for real. Meta's eating their lunch right now. Meta right now is so far ahead of Apple. It's ridiculous in the VR world. They're so far ahead. Cheaper headset. The changes here we're hearing from ThrillSeeker, smart.
Entire VR ecosystem for the past 10 years or so, and that's become especially evident in the past few. That's ecosystem fragmentation. And I'm not sure if you've noticed, but the only true decent option if you want an affordable all-in-one VR headset has been the Quest, and it's been that way for years. That's partially because of Meta heavily subsidizing the cost of hardware, making headsets cheaper than any company can afford to sell them, which is great for consumers. But that's also partially because, to be real, Meta is leaps and bounds ahead of any sort of competition in terms of software capabilities. Maybe besides a few fringe cases with Apple and the Vision Pro, but in general, even with their restricted store, the Quest store is larger and full of higher quality apps than anything else out there by a large margin. And it also turns out that most of them are either Quest exclusive like Beat Saber or built specifically to work with Quest OS and Quest headsets only. So any and all competition that wants to be in this space has to fight basically two battles. One, building and curating their own entire store, and then on top of that, building affordable, decent hardware. Not to mention actually building an operating system. And this whole move just put a giant wrench in all of that. The current Quest operating system ceases to exist. It has now been renamed as the Meta Horizon OS, and they even added little stickers on the box to let everyone know. And as of now, this change seems to be mostly in name, but in principle, this this is a massive change for the entire VR industry moving forward, as Meta is now licensing the Horizon OS to outside vendors and hardware manufacturers, so that all anyone else has to do is build their own hardware, and Meta takes care of the entire operating system, SDKs, storefront, basically everything else. And I think from this point, it's pretty safe to say that Horizon OS is bound to become a sort of de facto virtual and mixed reality operating system moving forward, which it already is today. But the difference is that it's going to be ran on non-Meta devices. For example, ASUS announced that they are building a Republic of Gamers VR headset of some sort that is powered by Qualcomm chips and runs on Meta's Horizon OS, and will likely have full access to the entire Horizon store. That has never happened before. Lenovo also announced the same, as Meta and Lenovo have been speaking on some sort of partnership for a long time. And I can imagine these two headsets and from these two manufacturers won't be the only ones. And maybe a company like ASUS can carve out their own hardware market share, which is kind of a crazy thought. That's also not to mention things like highly stripped down devices or specialized versions of the Horizon operating system, like Samsung's own Android wrapper on their phones, for better or worse. But I think one of the most interesting things about both of these moves are the questions it brings up for existing devices and existing companies that have heavily struggled within the space over the past few years. Again, competition with Meta is really hard, and companies like Pico and HTC and even Pimax have struggled to both build hardware and entire operating systems and populate a game store, and still, after doing all of that, at the end of the day, end up with a more expensive device that does less. And so, do these companies just start using Horizon OS as well? Is it the end of experimentation with different OS options?
Wow.
And I'm not really sure. And while this is a really awesome move, and I think it's overall extremely healthy for the VR space, and it's something that's pretty necessary, I can't help but think of the possible negatives. Because while this is a positive move, it is also a land grab, a very real land grab. And I can't tell if it's gonna be the best thing ever or the worst thing ever if basically every Android
I mean, it's the best thing ever in terms of adoption. It's not necessarily the best thing ever in terms of variety. You know, that's quite an interesting thing happening.
Based XR device is running on Meta software. On one hand, exclusives like Beat Saber, a huge seller of hardware itself, could run on anything that runs Horizon OS. And on the developer side, this makes everything so much easier. One operating system, one set of standards, all pushed to a variety of devices and to as many people as possible. And while this is exactly what OpenXR has been working for years, OpenXR being the cross-platform standard for XR applications that technically should allow any XR app built within the standards to be used on any OpenXR device. In practice, it's really not that simple. And still, porting titles from Quest to, say, HTC's or Pico standalone headset, even if they're OpenXR compliant, still require actual porting. If everyone adopted Horizon OS and its standards, then everyone would be living under the same roof. However, if everyone lives under the same roof, that also means that they live under the same rules. And as awesome as Meta's contributions have been to the space over the years, they don't exactly have the best track record as a whole. And so, with any big move like this, where an entire industry is possibly unifying under a single corporate worldview, there are inherent risks and downsides that I don't think should be ignored.
Yeah, I'm not, here's the thing. I know that Apple Vision Pro, like Starlet's like, hey, listen, I love Apple, and I see your comment. Starlet says head to an Apple store and get the free Apple Vision Pro demo. Listen, I'm not banging on the expertise or the quality of it. Like, I'm sure it's an amazing experience. In terms of like adoption, you're not going to see it with the Apple Vision Pro. You know, you're just not going to see it. But it's specialized, yeah. Like for specialized AR applications, yes, Starlet. What's up, DevCon? Thank you for that. But you're certainly not going to trailblaze sales or trailblaze adoption with it. You know, you understand what I'm saying? And in terms of getting everybody unified, which we're seeing with the OS here, where Zuck is pulling a Bill Gates move on the OS system. You're seeing it on the price points of the headsets that Meta's bringing out. In terms of like overall bringing everybody in the VR space, Meta's doing it more so than Apple. And price. At the end of the day, my God, isn't it always the price? It's always the price. Always the price.
along with, looking at the positives. But I think we should zoom out a little bit. Now that we have a whole big picture view of exactly what these changes are and exactly the problems that they solve, when you do zoom out a little further, it kind of paints a bit of a different picture. This was clearly a signal and a direct move in opposition to Google, and in some ways Apple, but I'd say more so Google. Google themselves have been working on their own XR operating system, also on Android, dubbed XROS, in partnership with Samsung and possibly a few other vendors. Now, we've been talking about...
I would argue that there's been the reason why VR hasn't taken off, I mean, like, it has. If you look at the numbers, VR is doing fairly well, but why it hasn't just blasted to the moon is because the space is too fragmented. Like, Mad Styles' comment is, I think, on point. Mad Style says fragmentation stifles the innovation. When you do not have unity, when you do not have unity on a mass level, usually what ends up happening is you don't get like this stellar shot to the moon because it's all over the place. Once you pick the script and you know what it is and you've got enough people back behind it because you've made the space much easier to get into, and you have that level of unity and all that fragmentation is gone, you will see, like, is it the best thing? Is it always the best thing? No. I think you always have variety. I think you always have that competition, but like, there has never been this centralized, like, we are VR and we're going to make it happen since I think Meta started this whole, when Zuck rebooted from Facebook to Meta, I didn't know what to think. I was like, man, this could be a make or break moment. I said he pushed in all his chips. When he did this originally, you could pull it from the tape in the history of the DGs in the morning. When he did this, I was like, man, this is a ballsy move. Some of you might remember. Some of you might remember when Meta stock was below $100 a share, and I'm like, and it was Facebook. It was Facebook, and it was tanking. And I'm like, man, this change to Meta is a make or break moment. I'm like, he pushed all the chips in and he's flipping the script and he is going all in. He pushed them all in. Most of you who are old enough remember me saying that. And I was like, here we go. Let's see. He's making it pay out huge, over $400 a share right now. Okay. And he's doing it. And the reason why he did it is because he said, you know what? Nobody's done this yet. I mean, it was a bold move, but it was the only move. Like, when you really think about it, nobody was doing it. Nobody got and said, you know what, I'm going to make this accessible, easy, and we're going to get crazy mass adoption, and I'm going to find a way to make this work. Nobody really even approached it until Zuck like that. So, wow, I'm not a Zuck fan, but hats off to the dude, because that was a ballsy move.
About this for a while, but it's now pretty clear when you look at it that there's a bit of tension between Meta and Google. Google has refused for years now to bring the Play Store to the Quest and other Meta devices, something that should be an absolute no-brainer. I mean, just look at the Vision Pro. It clearly makes sense to have your whole app catalog available, but they've been holding out all this time, and I'm not sure if that's going to change, especially if Meta is trying to make their Android-based version of an XR operating system the standard, at the same time that Google is trying to make their Android-based XR operating system the standard. And at this point, kind of anything can happen. But what does happen over the next few years in this operating system land grab, as companies fight over OS market share, is bound to bring some really interesting things. And I think it'll be important to see just how good it can get for consumers. The best thing we can possibly get out of this is healthy competition and a whole lot of innovation. All I do ask is that you be careful as you possibly shop for your next XR operating system, as the openness that everyone claims and will continue to claim may not be as open as you think. But in the face of a unified system that works for developers and users and kind of everyone involved, maybe it's a bit worth it. All I know is that
it is a bit worth it at this point in the game. It's a bit worth it because it needed to happen. It needed to happen. Nobody was doing it. There needs to be a gateway with arrows in it that says right here. There was really no easy, accessible way for developers to come to a space, feel like they were being accepted for what it was they were designing, get paid for what they deserved to design, and promoted. And now them changing the store is a smart move. That's literally like opening a gate that's got flashy LEDs on it with an arrow saying right here, we're doing it. Unifying an operating system Like they are so far ahead. Like Meta right now are so many steps ahead from competition. It's ridiculous. It's like how what Elon did with Tesla in the EV market. He's like, nobody's doing electronic vehicles. I'm just going to go gung-ho on it. That was a ballsy move back in the day, whether you like or hate Elon. Like, a lot of people were like, this shit's never going to happen. And then, boom, it happened. He did it. He is so far ahead. Elon with Tesla, Zuck with Meta. These guys just said, screw it, balls to the wall. I'm going to do it. You know, like when you have that type of commitment where it's 100% and they're going to be miles ahead of everybody else because they made the commitment long ago. Miles ahead. There's nobody coming close to Meta right now in terms of bringing people to them, adoption with VR in the Web3 space. I don't think there's anybody that close to him right now, in my opinion. Tesla with the EVs, nobody's even going to touch Tesla. They're don't even get me started about that.
We're in for some interesting times and a whole lot of changes. And of course, speaking of changes, this whole video was a bit of a change in itself. And these are just a few words from me to the real ones that are still here this late in the video and that care about what's been going on in my life and what's going to happen with the channel. And I realized looking at the date that this right now, today, is pretty much my 5-year anniversary on YouTube.
That's
and
awesome.
Besides moving for a few weeks, this is the longest that I've ever been away from YouTube and especially the internet. But let me tell you, taking a bit of time away from Twitter, Discord, YouTube, all of it was probably the best decision I could have ever made. And I also highly recommend it to everyone, just, you know, every now and then. I think the saddest thing in the entire universe is to watch something that is made out of passion slowly have that passion sucked away from it. And the second
it's like for what he does, it would be pretty draining. You know, like what ThrillSeeker's doing, the content that he's making, like it was a space that hasn't been loved. You know, there was a lot of people like vocally, like, you know, push back against VR for the longest time. I think that'll get easier on him, but also the level of content so professional from ThrillSeeker. He's like a journalist. The reason I love watching ThrillSeeker, and Starlet turned me on to ThrillSeeker. The reason I love him is he's so honest. He's so factual, and he's going out and he's trying all these VR products and giving his reviews and his opinions upon them. I super respect this dude in this space. He is a very genuine guy. And, you know, it's easy to get like a burnout when you're covering this topic. Like, it's super easy for people to get burnout when they're creating content like this. So ThrillSeeker, congratulations on your 5 years. Super cool dude. Comes to our channel every once in a while and comments on our videos. He likes the reactions here. Actually, enhancements, not reactions. And I really appreciate the fact that a dude who's got, you know, nearly 1 million subscribers takes the time out of his day to be like, oh, hey, let's see what these guys think about the video I made. And that's really cool. So ThrillSeeker, congratulations for your 5 years, bro. Keep it up. Keep up the good work, man. And what Meta's doing, I think Meta's going to own the space. I think at this rate, I think Meta's going to own the space for real.